Hey guys, and welcome back to Heavenly Hills Homestead. It's been a long time since I've made a video because it's been a very busy summer, but I thought I would come on today and show you guys how I'm making some freezer meals. We have some good friends of ours, a couple different families that are going to be having babies here very soon, and I love to make freezer meals when I am having babies, and I love to do the same for any friends or family that are having babies. So I'm going to show you a couple of meals that I'm going to be making. We're going to make a couple different recipes for both of these families, and then I'm just going to make another batch for us so that we can have some freezer meals in our freezer. I don't usually cook freezer meals on a regular day-to-day or even regular basis at all for our family, but sometimes it's nice to have those on hand if there's ever a sickness or it's busy and I don't feel like cooking or something like that. I tend to just cook from scratch, really easy meals from scratch, but it'll be really nice to have a few freezer meals in the freezer just in case we ever need them. So today we're going to be making a teriyaki chicken, which will basically be just marinated chicken for us, but for our friends we're also going to bag up a portion of rice, and then I have some frozen vegetables to go with that, so it'll be a complete meal for them. We're going to make a baked mac and cheese. We're going to do some crock pot fajitas, which are really great. I love those. We're going to make lasagnas, and I also got some garlic bread to go with our friends who are getting these meals. And then I'm also going to make some lactation cookies. I love lactation cookies when I am newly postpartum. I mean, who doesn't like cookies ever? But since these mamas are having babies, we're going to make them some lactation cookies too. So it's going to be a busy afternoon. We spent all morning gathering our supplies, so let's get to it. So first things first, I'm just taking all of the supplies that I got and putting the stuff that I don't need right now into the freezer so it stays cold. As you can see, I got a bunch of vegetables and the throwaway trays and everything that I need for the meals that we're making. The first meal that I'm going to start out with is lasagna. If you haven't made homemade lasagna before, it is surprisingly easy. It's more just tedious than anything because you have to go through the work of layering everything. So I am just starting out. You can see I put some olive oil in my pot here. I decided to do a pot instead of a pan because I'm doing 3 lasagnas worth. So I, the day before, pulled out all the meat that I need for all these recipes and defrosted them in the fridge. And I have little bags of beef liver here. If you're not a liver eater, which I wouldn't proclaim to be a liver eater myself, it's really full of vitamins and nutrients and so good for you. And the easiest way that I've found to incorporate it into my diet is to just put it with ground beef. When I got the whole cow, if you guys saw that video, we asked the butcher to keep the heart and the liver for us, and I just portioned out the heart and the liver into small chunks, basically smaller than your palm, and I just have 2 bags of the liver here that's going to go with 3 pounds of meat, so you're not going to be able to taste it at all, especially when it's in the marinara sauce. I'm just taking the liver and chopping it up fine. If you have a food processor, that would make this step even easier than having to chop it up by hand really small. Now that my oil's hot, I'm putting the ground beef into the pot. Like I said, 3 pounds, basically 1 pound per lasagna here, and we're gonna get that browning up. Now I'm just adding a little bit of red wine to the browned meat or the browning meat. If you have not added red wine to a red sauce or a pasta sauce before, I highly recommend it. We're not really drinkers, but adding a little bit of red wine and cooking the alcohol down just adds an extra depth of flavor to the sauce. And since I'm doing just store-bought jarred sauce, normally I like to make homemade sauce, I really wanted that added flavor, so I just added that with the brown meat, and I'm letting that cook down. All the alcohol is going to be cooked out of this by the time you eat it. Really, by the time I assemble it, all the alcohol is cooked out, so you're not going to taste a bunch of wine in there. And now I'm adding ricotta cheese to a bowl. This is going to be those middle cheesy layers. So I had to put my little ones down for a nap. Now I'm back to assembling ricotta cheese. Ricotta cheese is a really nice creamy cheese, and I'm adding a bunch of my homemade Italian seasoning to it. I did realize after I got to this step that I should have picked a bigger bowl. Normally you can do this really quickly with like a hand mixer or even in your KitchenAid, but by the time that I realized that, I already had a dirty bowl, so I just decided to do it the old-fashioned way with a wooden spoon. I'm just mixing the Italian seasoning into the ricotta cheese mix. It just adds a little bit of flavor and is quite nice. And my sauce has been cooking down for a while. It has a good flavor, just taste testing it there. And now I'm just getting ready to assemble. I like to just line everything up so it's quick to just go through your station and just layer it up. These throwaway tins are awesome. I don't normally use them for myself, but when you've just had a baby, these throwaway tins are awesome, and you know, it's one less dish to worry about. So I'm definitely doing this for our friends. So what you do for lasagna is you just layer, I put sauce on the bottom, then I put noodles, and then I do cheese, and then again sauce, noodles, cheese, sauce, noodles, cheese. I take the ricotta mixture, and then after doing the ricotta, I do just some shredded mozzarella. You can also add Parmesan. I only had one little tub of Parmesan, so I saved that for the tops of the lasagnas. It just adds a great flavor to that. And yeah, I mean, this is lasagna. It's really easy. It's a lot easier than you think. The first time that I made lasagna from scratch, I thought it was going to be this big, huge thing, and really it's not. I mean, you could make your own homemade sauce and really go the whole nine, which usually I do like to do that, but it's not complicated at all. It's just more tedious because you're having to layer and do all the steps, but it's well worth it and very delicious. So like I said, I like to put Parmesan cheese on the top. You could also put like Italian seasoning on the top. I chose not to do that this time. Then I'm just putting aluminum foil on there. And then these throwaway tins came with plastic lids. And on the plastic lid, I'm just writing all the instructions for these meals. I do lasagna at 350 for an hour or until it's cooked through and bubbly. These are noodles that you can, you know, bake. You don't have to
boil them before you bake them. I find that to be a lot easier because the kind that you have to boil before always stick horribly for me. So after I got all of the lasagnas assembled, I just popped them in the freezer so that they could start freezing solid. And by the time that the families got them, everything was frozen solid. I took a garlic bread and I put it inside the plastic lid for each of the families that are getting these postpartum freezer meals. That just made it really easy to keep everything together, and they just kind of fit perfectly inside like that. Now I am moving on to the next meal, which is going to be chicken teriyaki. This meal is super simple. It's basically just marinated chicken. I'm taking my freezer bags here and I'm labeling each of them before I get started. You can cook this meat really easily in a crock pot, which is how I'm instructing these families to do it, just because that's the easiest way to do it. But if you thawed them, you could grill them, you could fry them up in a pan, you could do it really however you want, but I prefer to do it in a crock pot, so I'm just telling them to toss it in the crock pot and let it cook all day. I did get a pre-made teriyaki marinade from the store just to keep things really simple for me. Usually I like to make it from home, but since I was doing so many freezer meals and I was just trying to streamline everything, I decided to just go with a decent store-bought marinade. All I'm doing here is I'm just opening up my bags. I do like to kind of tuck the zipper outside because that keeps it a little cleaner. You just roll it outside of the bag, and then I'm just divvying up the chicken that I got for this meal. We did just butcher a whole bunch of meat chickens, but for simplicity's sake, I just bought store-bought chicken so I wouldn't have to fuss with all of my homegrown chicken to do this meal. Not that it's that hard, but it was really simple to just get it at the store. And now I'm just pouring a bunch of the teriyaki marinade in the bag. I mean, it's that simple, guys. I did decide to put a little bit of honey in the bags too, and then just a little bit of oil so that the meat won't stick whenever these families decide to cook them. Then I just push as much air as I can out of the bag, zip it tight, and then roll it up so that it'll freeze nicely. Next, I am just portioning out the rice, and then I decided to make things really simple for these families and put the meat, the rice, and the bagged up frozen vegetables all in one bag so that it's not 3 different bags. So I'm just labeling those bags here with instructions on how to cook the rice. I don't know how adept the husbands of these families are in the kitchen. I know mine certainly is not and needs all of the instructions and would not know how to cook rice unless I gave him the instructions. So I just wrote the instructions on how to cook rice, or how I like to cook rice, on the bags so that it just makes it really simple and a no-brainer for these families. after I got all of that assembled, I just popped it in the freezer so that it would freeze solid. Now I am starting on the fajitas. I love fajitas. I would eat fajitas every week, and often we do. We either do fajitas or tacos or nachos. Normally I would do sirloin or flank steak, but I decided to just get out a big roast that we had. It's like a huge 3-pound roast. So I just divided it into 3 and I'm just slicing the meat thin. I prefer steak fajitas. I know a lot of people like chicken fajitas, I think because it's cheaper, but I am biased and I think that steak fajitas are way, way better. So I'm doing steak fajitas for these friends, and you just slice the steak really thin and then you do the onions and peppers. I made it extra simple this time because I bought pre-sliced, pre-frozen peppers and onions, and you just put that in a bag with your seasoning and call it a day. I'm just writing instructions on the plastic bags, and then I flip the zipper on the outside to keep things nice and neat, and just put the ingredients inside. These are really simple to do in the crock pot. I suppose if you wanted to, you could defrost everything and then do it in a pan if you really wanted to get like a good caramelized flavor. But when I want really caramelized fajitas, I just do them from scratch. So when I do this, they always get cooked in the crock pot when it's already pre-assembled for a freezer meal. Just taking taco seasoning and putting a bunch in each bag, and then I'm going to put a little bit of oil in each bag as well. You don't see me do this here, but I do add the peppers and onions, the frozen bags, into these freezer bags and then pop them in the freezer to freeze as well. Now we are moving on to mac and cheese. Who does not like a baked mac and cheese? I don't know anybody who doesn't like baked mac and cheese. So I've got my boiling water and I'm just adding my noodles. You do need to boil these noodles just a little bit. You do it like 2 to 3 minutes less than the instructions say for fully cooked noodles, just so that they're not complete mush when you bake it. And then you make your cheese sauce, your roux. So I'm just popping a pan on here. You start with butter, melt that down, and then you add some flour. As you can see, I'm at the very bottom of my giant tub of flour here. I recently got well, I guess semi-recently, I've had it for a little while, got a grain mill. So I have been experimenting with milling my own flour. I'm still learning how to do it and how to bake with it. It's a little bit of a learning process because the stuff that you buy at the store, even when you get the unbleached, organic, all that jazz, it's still a lot different than when you mill your own flour fresh. So I hope soon to be putting a video out about home milling flour and kind of my experience with it and tips and tricks and all of that. You do want to make sure to stir your noodles so that they don't stick to the bottom. And yeah, I'm waiting for my butter to melt, and then I'm going to add my flour to make the roux so it'll be a nice thick cheese sauce. You do want to switch over to a whisk when you add the flour because it will help break up any clumps and things like that. I had very cold butter, so it took a minute to melt thoroughly here, but that's just the name of the game. I forgot to bring out butter. So now there's my flour, just whisking that, and you cook that for a couple of minutes until it's nice and thick and bubbly. And then you add your milk and cheese and all that stuff. See, I totally eyeball everything. Once I get to know a recipe and I've made it a couple times and I've done it successfully, I tend to not read the recipes anymore unless it's something really particular like baking or bread making and that sort of stuff that needs very specific amounts of ingredients. I've found that with most recipes outside of baking, you can eyeball it once you get a feel for it. So for this, I just added milk to the roux and I'm waiting for it to thicken up. I'm adding seasoning, salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, that sort of stuff, just making it taste nice and delicious. And whisking away so it doesn't burn on the bottom. Adjusting my heat because my range is getting old and kind of persnickety. The recipe that I normally use doesn't call for cream cheese, but cream cheese is really good in mac and cheese, and I had it on hand. So I just added a couple of blocks of cream cheese. It tends to give it like a smoother, creamy texture instead of like a gooey, cheesy texture, if that makes sense. So once my noodles were drained, I just divvied them up into these containers. And because I had so much, it was a lot easier for me to divvy up the noodles and then pour cheese sauce on top and then mix it together. Normally you would mix it all together and then pour it into your freezer dish, but that's just not how I did it. And then of course my pan was too small to add all the cheddar cheese to my cheese sauce, so I just poured the noodles, poured the half-done cheese sauce, and then poured the cheddar cheese on top and mixed it up really good. And it was perfect because it was all warm, so it melted the cheddar cheese and mixed it in anyways. And these pans were just perfect for all of that. Mixing it up really well. And as you can see, my dogs are just hankering for dropped snacks. Everybody tends to hover when I'm in the kitchen because they know that I drop things on the floor, and the dogs absolutely love that. And of course you have to taste test because it's mac and cheese, I mean, really. And then because it's baked mac and cheese, I'm topping it with more cheese. That'll be a nice bubbly layer. Did the rest of that cheddar cheese, and then a little bit of Parmesan cheese as well. After that, I just put tin foil over the top. That'll protect it in the freezer. I did a double layer because I decided not to do the plastic cover on this one, and then on the mac and cheese, I mean, and then I wrote the instructions on top. It's similar to lasagna. You know, you basically bake it at like 350 for like 45 minutes, and then you take the top off so that the top of the cheese layer gets nice and kind of crispy on it. That's the best part about baked mac and cheese. And then you enjoy. Okay guys, here's the freezer. I already gave one of the families their freezer meals, but this is what it looks like. Don't mind tomatoes, but we've got a few different meals here. We've got the baked mac and cheese, the lasagna with garlic bread. This is the teriyaki chicken with the rice and the vegetables, and then the sheet pan, or you could do them in a sheet pan, but crock pot fajitas, and a pack of tortillas for the families. All of them have instructions, and they're all packaged up perfectly for these families to enjoy. And that's all she wrote. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe, and let me know some of your favorite freezer meals. I aspire to do more freezer meals in the future. These ones are ours here, but I kind of get stuck with what to put in a freezer besides just raw ingredients. So if you have any ideas of what you like to do for freezer meals, let me know. And until next time, welcome to the homestead.